Hey everybody, welcome on into another episode of the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, of course, Matthew Quinn, as always, and we are brought to you today by the GSMC Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the show. We've got a good one for you today. First of all, we're going to talk about we're going to talk about the top 5 draft spots that I think could possibly shape the rest of the NFL draft that's coming up in just a week's time now. Also, we've got a couple of season previews, one in the NFL and one in college in our College Corner segment. But make sure you stick around for later in the show, and I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on what recently happened. Actually, today, Aaron Rodgers made an appearance on the Pat McAfee show, spoke about everything that was going on for the first time in this whole process in about 3 months, first time we've heard from him. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on that. But before we start, I would like to ask that you guys like and follow the show. As always, if you have a question during the show that you want to get mentioned on this show, then definitely go ahead to our Super Chat and put your input in. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, of course. And we appreciate all of the support that we get from you guys, whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or just an opinion that you have to share. Just don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Just use the Super Chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a great way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you that sports content that you love, and we appreciate all of your support. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit that Super Chat button, and let's keep this show interactive and exciting. And if you prefer, you can always go to the website, GSMCsports.net, to tip, donate, and leave a question or a comment there. We couldn't do what we do without you guys and all of your support, so thank you so much for being part of our community. And once again, that website is GSMCsports.net. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the first segment of the show here, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the NFL draft since it is 1 week away as of today. Next Thursday, I'm looking into a few different ideas as to what we can do in terms of covering the draft, because obviously this show is going to be taking place in the middle of the draft. So obviously I want to find a way to talk about it somehow and include it, of course, because it's a big event in the NFL. But these are just a few spots in the NFL draft that I think could kind of change the way a lot of other teams are viewing the draft right now. And first of all, I'm going to start with the Giants with the 3rd pick. And the Giants are most likely not taking a quarterback at the 3rd pick, since they went ahead and they signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. And then, of course, they still have Tommy DeVito on the roster as well. So their quarterback room is pretty much full up. So I can't imagine they're going to take a quarterback. So that leaves just a couple of guys in particular, and that's Abdul Carter, and out of Penn State, the edge rusher, and then of course Travis Hunter from Colorado, the dual threat player that plays both wide receiver and corner. So there is a thought that maybe they can take Travis Hunter, but that's going to be kind of a big deal in terms of this pick, because it's going to shape what a few teams after the Giants do. Of course, the Browns pick just before them, they're most likely not going quarterback either, so they could take Travis Hunter too. So that's going to kind of shape how the Giants do their pick, and then depending on what they do, if they decide to take a quarterback, which I don't think they will, then that could change a lot of things in the NFL draft. There's still a couple quarterback-needy teams out there. There's thoughts that maybe there's some teams that could trade back. Carolina basically came out and said that they're open to taking calls to potentially trade back out of their spot at number 8. So a lot of things can happen, of course, on draft night, but I think the Giants are a team to watch for a lot of different reasons. You know, a lot of different teams can go certain ways based on what they do. So I have that there. So the next one I was actually not going to originally include in this list until we got the news that we got a couple of days ago about Derek Carr, and that is the Saints with the 9th pick. I put them on this list here because I feel like they are definitely a team to watch, especially now because they put Derek Carr, that report of his injury came out, and there's potential that if it all is true and all of that, there's potential that he could need surgery and he could be out for the entire season. So that's going to make what the Saints do a little bit interesting, because there's talk that they could potentially go after Shedeur Sanders with that number 9 pick. And there are some other teams out there, the Steelers are one of them, that had visited with Shedeur Sanders. So there's an interest there, especially with the Aaron Rodgers ongoing situation not really being resolved yet. So they could move on to quarterback. But the Saints kind of threw a wrench in a lot of different things. Carr is still under contract, so I mean they restructured his deal in the offseason, so there is the want to keep him there. But with this injury that just seemingly kind of came out of nowhere, there's kind of questions in regards to what they're going to be doing at quarterback, because if Derek Carr isn't good to go, and he's an older quarterback now, and how healthy is he going to be? He's had some injury issues in recent years. He hasn't really been able to stay healthy. Last year, he dealt with a lot of injuries and missed a lot of time. And now we have the shoulder injury situation right after they give him the restructured contract. So the Saints have to start thinking about the future at some point. So with Derek Carr being hurt and they being, placed in the top 10 in terms of draft order, you could think that they could potentially go after a quarterback right here. And, maybe they could even be a candidate that other teams want to trade up to get ahead of, just so they can make sure that they can get their quarterback, without the Saints potentially going in and snatching a quarterback up, when a lot of people didn't necessarily think the Saints were going to draft a quarterback with that number 9 overall pick. So that's going to be a team to watch too. It depends on what they decide to do. They do have other needs there. They could potentially go wide receiver, and also a name to kind of consider, just especially with this entire draft going around, is Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, his name has been floated around in terms of being a trade partner with somebody because of his situation in Atlanta. He doesn't want to be a backup. Atlanta doesn't want him to be the starter. They want to ride with Michael Penix. So he could potentially be a name that you hear called on draft night in terms of being traded somewhere. So maybe the Saints could take a flyer on Kirk Cousins. Who knows? But with them restructuring Derek Carr and their current cap situation, I would highly doubt that Cousins would be an option for them. Most likely here, if they do want to go quarterback, it's going to be through this draft, and it would be with the 9th pick if they're able to get the guy that they really want with that pick. And who knows, maybe they move up a pick or two just to make sure. But all those answers, will come to light on draft night next week. So moving on, the other pick that I have on this list was the pick that was actually right before the Giants, and that is number 2, and that's the Browns. Cam Ward most likely going to the Titans. Pretty much everybody knows that. The Browns, I don't think, go quarterback now that they have signed Joe Flacco, and of course they went ahead and got Kenny Pickett in the offseason earlier on, and they still have Deshaun Watson on the roster. So they most likely are not going quarterback with the 2nd pick, I would think. I think most likely they're going to go Travis Hunter or possibly Abdul Carter. There's been talk about that as well. So that's going to influence what the Giants do, of course, and also what the Patriots do, because the Patriots have been linked to Travis Hunter as well. But the Patriots, I still think, are going to go ahead and get the Arizona receiver Ted McMillan at number 4. But so this may not really affect what the Patriots do too much, but definitely these earlier round picks, there's going to be teams that are affected by what the Browns decide to do with that pick. So the other pick that I have on this list is the New York Jets. Their pick at number 7 in the first round this year. They, of course, just signed Justin Fields to a 2-year deal in the offseason. I think they could still be a team that potentially goes quarterback. I don't know if they go with the number 7 pick, though. That's, it's kind of high and based on their needs, especially when they just gave Justin Fields a contract. But that's a team to watch in terms of quarterback, because they they only gave Justin Fields a 2-year deal. So there is a possibility that they still want to plan for the future, and Justin Fields isn't part of that future. That is a possibility. So they're going to be a team to watch for sure. And the last team that I have on this list is the Steelers at number 21. They've been, talked about a lot in this offseason based on what they're going to do at quarterback. I still ultimately think that they're going to go defensive line, but this whole Aaron Rodgers situation could kind of force their hand to try and go quarterback in the first round. They are probably the most likely team to either trade back or trade up out of everybody that's on this list. I think the Steelers are the most likely of the 5 on this list to be involved in some type of trade. Maybe they want to move up a couple of extra spots. There's been talk that they could move up, or at least try to move up to that 8 spot right before the Saints pick, because the Panthers, of course, have talked about potentially fielding calls for that pick. So the Steelers could make a call there, but they would have to most likely give up a lot of capital to get to that spot, because going from 21 to 8, you're most likely, of course you're swapping first round picks, but you're most likely having to give something else away as well in order to get up to that spot. So, because that's a top 10 spot. So depending on what they would have to give up, I could see them maybe doing that, but I don't know if they go trade up to number 8, because I think that's going to be too rich for their taking, or for their taste. So that's what I think. But those are 5 picks for this upcoming draft. It's coming up next week in exactly 1 week's time as of today. So it's going to be fun talking about that when that all goes down. But those are my thoughts on some of the pick positions that could potentially shape this draft coming up next week. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about draft type stuff. This next segment that we're going to talk about is my picks for the top 5 quarterback draft classes in the last 25 years. So since 2000. So stick with us, and we'll be right back right after this, and we'll talk about some more NFL draft stuff. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, guys. Sorry, had my mic on mute there. But welcome back to the show. Before we go ahead and get into the second segment of the show, I just wanted to remind you guys that if you have any questions, any comments, anything like that that you want to add to the show, go ahead and hit our super chat. Go ahead and hit the super chat button on the GSMC Sports website or right here on YouTube. GSMCsports.net is the website if you want to tip, donate, or just leave a question or a comment there, or you can leave a comment right here on YouTube. So go ahead and do that if you want to contribute to the show. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get right into the rest of our show here. Second segment that we have is our top 5 quarterback draft classes since 2000. So over the past 25 years, there's obviously been a lot of great quarterbacks that have come and gone throughout the league in that time frame. But we want to take a look at some of the best classes that have some of the more notable quarterbacks that were in them. Doesn't necessarily have to be all first-round quarterbacks, just some guys, because there were some guys that ended up having pretty good careers that got picked in later rounds. So we're going to get right into that. Number 5 The quarterback draft class was back in 2005. That's who I have as number 5. Some notable quarterbacks that were in that particular draft in the first round. Alex Smith went number 1 overall. Aaron Rodgers went in the first round as well at number 24. Former Washington, then when they were the Redskins, but now Commanders, but Jason Campbell was drafted at number 25 right after Aaron Rodgers. A couple of other guys just to kind of note that are there. Dan Orlovsky, who is now an ESPN personality, been kind of known for his infamous play where he ran out of the back of the end zone when he was with the Detroit Lions. Also Matt Castle, former backup of the Kansas City Chiefs, but also of the New England Patriots. And then finally, in the final round at pick 250, another notable quarterback was Ryan Fitzpatrick, who has been known for a lot of memorable games and memorable moments throughout the course of his career. He is now, of course, at NFL Network calling or on the halftime show and pregame show of Thursday Night Football. So he's always in the media too. So, very well-known personality at this point. But that was a pretty solid quarterback draft class. Aaron Rodgers, of course, 4-time MVP and has a Super Bowl ring from back in 2010. Alex Smith went to a Super Bowl with San Francisco, of course, had the really bad knee injury or leg injury that kept him out of a couple of years of football, and then there's talk that he could potentially even lose his leg or even lose his life because he had a really bad infection with that. It was a really, really bad injury that he had, but he somehow was able to come back and play for Washington and, got comeback player of the year, of course, that year that he started for Washington. Led him to the playoffs too. So, he was, had quite a career overall, but when he was in Washington and he had that really bad injury, a lot of people thought that he was going to be done, and some people thought that he may not even walk again because he could have lost his leg, but was able to come back and play well. So that's definitely memorable in itself, but not to mention that he was always a pretty solid quarterback when he was on the field anyway. So, but moving on to the next one, number 4, I have the 2012 draft class. In round 1, we got Andrew Luck and RG3, Robert Griffin III, back-to-back. With the number 1 pick, the Colts, of course, took Andrew Luck, and then Robert Griffin III at number 2 went to Washington. Also in the first round was Ryan Tannehill with the number 8 pick, and then Brandon Weeden to Cleveland at the number 22 pick. A couple of other guys that were notable in that particular draft class is Brock Osweiler, of course. A lot of people know him for his time in Houston and then in Denver. Didn't end up really working out after he had one pretty decent year and got a really massive payday, and then really didn't do much after that payday. Probably the most successful quarterback in this entire draft class was in round 3, and that was Russell Wilson to the Seahawks. Of course, Russell Wilson is a Super Bowl champion, been to 2 Super Bowls in his career, and he still is currently playing. Not quite what he once was, but when he was in his prime, he was very, very talented. And then, of course, Nick Foles was in that same round. He's a Super Bowl champion as well. Kind of a career backup that ended up having a dream run in the postseason for the Philadelphia Eagles, and then, of course, led them to a Super Bowl victory over the New England Patriots in that magical run that they had a few years ago. And again, in round 4, we had Kirk Cousins, who is still currently on a NFL roster, although he is not currently slated as the starter for Atlanta. And we briefly talked about that whole situation in the last segment. But he is still currently playing, and he is one of the more higher paid quarterbacks in NFL history. He's made a ton of money over his career, from having decent runs in Washington to having a pretty solid run in Minnesota. And now that he's at Atlanta, it's kind of on the back end of his career now, looking into where his potential next team might be. So that's a pretty solid draft class as well. Andrew Luck, of course, everybody knows, retired early, which was unfortunate because he was one of the top prospects in recent memory coming out of college, coming out of Stanford. RG3 won the Heisman the previous season, and of course, with Baylor, was then drafted high. And that was the big talk of that draft, was who was going to get drafted first, Luck or Griffin. And it seemed more and more likely that Luck was going to the Colts. That was the whole, deal that they had. So, but, Ryan Tannehill was a decent quarterback as well. Had a couple of good years in Tennessee. Didn't really pan out where he was drafted, which was in Miami. But Tennessee, he definitely had a better run there with offensive coordinator Arthur Smith and then head coach Mike Vrabel. When they were both there, that offense was one of the best in the league, and they were the number 1 seed one particular season too. So, pretty solid draft class right there. Brandon Weeden kind of fizzled out, but he was an older quarterback coming out of college anyway. So went to Cleveland, and that's kind of where quarterbacks go to basically have no careers. So, but moving on to the number 3 draft class I have is the 2018 draft class. That is a draft class that featured in round 1 Baker Mayfield with the number 1 overall pick to the Browns. Sam Darnold came in at number 3. Josh Allen was number 7 to Buffalo. Josh Rosen went to Arizona, and obviously that didn't really work out there. And then, of course, Lamar Jackson was the very last pick of the first round. Another notable quarterback, of course, Mason Rudolph in the 3rd round to Pittsburgh. But it's a pretty solid first round of draft class there. Baker Mayfield has had kind of an up and down career, really. In Cleveland, he came in and started, really, really well. Actually won a playoff game for the Browns. And then the Browns, mistakenly got rid of him and signed, or traded for Deshaun Watson. So we all know what happened there. Baker Mayfield bounced around a couple teams after he left the Browns before finally settling in Tampa Bay, where he has had a pretty solid resurgence in his career since coming there. Last year had over 40 touchdown passes, has been fantastic with the Buccaneers and really has resurrected his career. And he's now considered one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now. I'd put him top 10, top 15 at least for Baker Mayfield. His numbers definitely prove it. You don't throw for over 40 touchdowns if you're not one of the best quarterbacks in the league, So Baker Mayfield definitely has made a name for himself. Sam Darnold kind of had a slow start to his career, had one really good season last year with Minnesota. He is now in Seattle on a new deal. Since that pretty solid year that he had last year has kind of made him some extra money and got his career kind of restarted as well. But now that he's on a brand new team and he is the, fixed starter there's no competition there. He is the clear uncut starter. So we'll see what he does in his next, stop. But of course, reigning MVP Josh Allen was another one that was drafted in the top 10 in the 2018 draft. What can you say about Josh Allen that hasn't already been said? I mean, he's a fantastic quarterback. He is the MVP, and deservingly, because there's been a couple of years where you probably could have given him the MVP and then he didn't win it. So I like Josh Allen, of course, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And then Josh Rosen, we don't really need to talk about because that was kind of a bust. But Lamar Jackson, finishing out that first round, obviously 2-time MVP, always has the Ravens in the conversation for Super Bowl contending. And now that he's got some additional weapons and Derrick Henry and, whoever they may decide to draft, they could, and of course they did sign DeAndre Hopkins as well. So that adds to that offense as well. So we'll see what they do in the draft, but Lamar Jackson is, fantastic quarterback, has really developed since coming into the league as a passer, because he was known mainly for his running ability. But now a lot of people, they kind of understand that he is also a very, very good thrower of the football as well. So that is number 3. Number 2, we'll try and go through these a little quickly. Number 2, the most recent draft class that was really stood out to everybody, and that was the Joe Burrow draft class, which was, of course, Joe Burrow taken number 1 overall, Tua Tagovailoa out of Alabama gets taken by Miami. Justin Herbert gets taken by the Chargers, and then Jordan Love gets taken by the Packers. And also, let's not forget, in round 3, Jalen Hurts was a quarterback that was taken with the number 53 overall pick by the Philadelphia Eagles. So good quarterback class there. You have a guy in Joe Burrow that has been to a Super Bowl and has put up some crazy numbers in that offense in Cincinnati. Tua has kind of had injury issues, so he struggled a little bit, but for the most part, he's still a pretty solid quarterback. Justin Herbert is another solid quarterback that just hasn't really had the right situation around him, but maybe that changes now in the second year under Jim Harbaugh. And then, of course, Jalen Hurts just won a Super Bowl, so, he is right there where you want to be, in terms of, being a quarterback prospect. And, now he's made quite of a career for himself with that Super Bowl championship, has played very well in both of the Super Bowls that he's played in also. So Jalen Hurts definitely one of the more underrated quarterbacks still in this game, and he's definitely one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But number 1 on this list of the best quarterback draft classes in the past 25 years is the 2004 draft class. Everybody knows about it. It's the clear-cut gold standard for draft classes. Eli Manning, 2-time Super Bowl champion. Phillip Rivers, who never did win a Super Bowl but has really, really good numbers and has been a solid fixture for San Diego and LA, the Chargers, the entire time that he was in his career. Had a couple of other stops right after the Chargers, but for the most part spent his career with the Chargers. And then, of course, Ben Roethlisberger, a 2-time Super Bowl champion. Been to 3 Super Bowls, Ben Roethlisberger has, and he has all of the franchise records in terms of passing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So definitely those top 3 guys, those were the most notable ones. All Hall of Famers, all 3 of them. A couple of other notable guys on that draft was J.P. Losman, was kind of a solid backup throughout his career. Matt Schaub played for the Falcons and the Texans. He was kind of a career backup, as well as Luke McCown, who got taken in the 4th round. So he, I believe, is in coaching now, or maybe that's Josh McCown I'm thinking of. But either way, the 2004 draft class for quarterbacks is still the gold standard. You have 3 surefire Hall of Famers that are in the first round with the top 11 picks. Eli was taken in the number 1, and although it was kind of weird because Phillip Rivers was originally going to be, picked by the Giants, and then the Giants ended up trading for Eli Manning after Eli Manning was originally drafted by the Chargers. And, everybody knows that story. It was kind of a big deal when the draft was going along. But those are my picks for my top 5 quarterback classes since the year 2000. So in the past 25 years. So if you guys have any questions or comments about that, definitely let me know and we can discuss that. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into some season previews here. So stick with us, and we will be right back right after this.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. We're going to get right into our next segment of the show, and we're going to do a little season preview for the Washington Commanders. And, of course, we did a season preview way back when before free agency started. So we're kind of going through and revisiting a lot of the teams that we covered then, now that the free agency frenzy has kind of died down, and now that everybody is looking towards the NFL draft that is in just 1 week's time, we're going to just take a look back at what they've done in the offseason so far to this point and what they could do coming up in the draft as well. And also going to take a little quick look back at what they did last year in a much improved, vastly improved, team overall for Washington coming into last year. I mean, most people did not expect Washington to win more than a handful of games, like 5 or 6 games. And instead they turned that around and, ended up going 12-5, second in the NFC East, only because the Eagles had a crazy good year. But they ended up losing to the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. They beat a couple of really good teams to get there. They beat the Buccaneers to get there, to get to that matchup against Detroit, who was the number 1 overall seed in the NFC, and they ended up beating them pretty convincingly. Their offense was able to move the ball at will, and their defense made enough stops, and they kind of controlled that game for the most part. So they were very impressive in that game. And then, of course, ran into a buzzsaw in the NFC Championship game where the Eagles just kind of wiped the floor with them, putting up over 50 points and a dominant performance for sure. But, the Commanders shouldn't hold their head, down too low after that. They played the team that eventually ended up winning the Super Bowl, so you can't really even, be too mad about that. Sure, it doesn't feel good to give up that many points, but to be able to get there on a season in which nobody expected you to even make the playoffs, you had a rookie quarterback, brand new head coach, new owner, a whole new system, whole new regime, and they were able to turn that into a very successful season. And Jaden Daniels was, a breath of fresh air for this Washington franchise that really has desperately needed something positive over the last decade or so. It's just been a lot of misery with some really poor ownership, and it's kind of driven down a lot of the fan base. But the fan base is back now because they have whole new hope with this new regime, and Jaden Daniels was fantastic in his rookie season. Ended up getting Rookie of the Year. It was pretty much a landslide as far as that is concerned. In my mind, I didn't think it was that close. I think Jaden Daniels was the clear-cut offensive Rookie of the Year, and that's what he ended up winning. So it was the first NFC Championship game that they went to back since Joe Gibbs and Mark Rippon were running a team that ended up going to a Super Bowl and winning it in 1991. And they took a huge step in the building, basically all around its quarterback. When they went ahead and got Jaden Daniels, they changed the whole outcome of this franchise and the whole trajectory of this franchise. And then this offseason, they've done some things that have kind of hoping to help Jaden Daniels as he continues to develop as a young quarterback. They went and they got Deebo Samuel from the 49ers in a trade. And, of course, traded with the Houston Texans and got Pro Bowl left tackle Laramie Tunsil to shore up that offensive line, at least the left side of that offensive line. So good moves there from Washington. They still have some other needs that they still need to address, of course. On the offensive line, there are still some needs on the right side of that offensive line. There's not really as much help as you would like. So maybe offensive line is, something that they address in the draft. But right now, Brandon Coleman couldn't hold down one side last year after progressing as a rookie. But on the other side, Andrew Wiley could be done in Washington. He's got a year remaining on his contract. Since the Commanders went ahead and got the upgrade with Tunsil, you have to think that he could be on his way out. And also, even with Zach Ertz returning, he's going to be a short-term solution because he's 34 years old at tight end. So tight end is also another need for the Washington Commanders. And they also need some sort of help at corner because they went ahead and they got Marshawn Lattimore during the course of the year last year. Didn't really pan out the way they wanted it to. He wasn't available for the first few games after they signed him. And then when he did come in, you didn't really hear from him too much. So it was, not necessarily the greatest result in that signing. So they're going to probably want to revamp that position as well. They really struggled against the run last year. So that is a position that they definitely need to address, of course. But going ahead and getting Josh Sweat is a big step in that direction, or in the right direction, excuse me. So, the Commanders, if they can shore up some things here and there, I think they could be right back there in the conversation for, one of the better teams in the NFC. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC, in my opinion, based on what we saw last year. So, the other thing for the Commanders that is good is they do have plenty of cap space. With Jaden Daniels still being on his rookie contract, they don't have a ton of money that is being dedicated to the quarterback position, and they won't have to worry about that at least for a couple of more years before they are ultimately going to have to pay him, whatever the, projected money will be, which at that point, who knows, with these quarterbacks taking these wild contracts here and there, who knows how much Washington's going to have to pay for Jaden Daniels when it comes that time. But they had at the start of the offseason right around $84 million in projected salary cap space, was top 5 in the NFL at that time. They still do have some cap space that they could potentially go ahead and, use to shore up some good positions in the along that defense. One of the more surprising moves that they went ahead and made in the offseason was releasing Jonathan Allen, the defensive tackle. Freed up about $16.5 million in cap space, though, so they were able to, use that, or add that to some of their cap space and, give them more flexibility to go and get certain players and all that. So, but upgrading at tackle over Wiley, I think, should be the priority for the offseason for the Commanders going forward. Having Laramie Tunsil on the left side is definitely an upgrade, and being able to get him for, pretty much peanuts, is definitely positive. As we look towards the NFL draft, though, the Washington Commanders have 3 picks in the first 3 rounds, and then they don't have another pick again until the 6th and 7th rounds. So they have a pick in the first round at number 29. In the second round, they're at number 61. And in the third round, in a pick that they acquired from the Dolphins, they are at number 79. So those first 3 picks are going to be pivotal in how their season goes going forward, and just how their next couple of seasons, if they can nail this draft and the next coming drafts, they can really, make a name for themselves and be legitimately in that conversation each and every year, as long as they have Jaden Daniels. If you look forward to the actual draft itself, I think one of the good fits that Washington could potentially go and get is Josh Connerly Jr., the offensive tackle from Oregon. Getting Laramie Tunsil, of course, was a huge get for this offensive line, but they still need some help along the offensive line. So going to get Josh Connerly, I think, would be a very good move for them going forward. So that should be top priority, in my opinion. There is some extra need along that line as well with their late season ACL tear that they, that Sam Cosmi, the guard, suffered an ACL tear late in the season last year. So he could miss part of the season this coming season. So that's something to keep an eye on, of course, if you're a Washington fan. He was a 5-star recruit. Or speaking of Connerly here, 5-star recruit, won the Anthony Munoz Award as the nation's top high school lineman when he was coming out of high school into college. And then he was a 2-year starter at left tackle for Oregon, who, of course, were in the college football playoff in those years as well. So he projects as a starter in the NFL, and he's got a lot of upside at that position. So he would be an excellent choice for Washington at number 29 if they were able to get him, if he was still available at that point, of course. So, so I have the Commanders going forward just overall this season. I could see them. They were 12 wins last year. Could absolutely see them getting 12 wins again this year. They've got enough talent on that offense. Very well coached offensively, too, with Cliff Kingsbury. Dan Quinn is a defensive-minded coach, so their defense should be improved, I would think, moving forward or into this coming season. Add a couple of other pieces on that defense via the draft, and maybe a couple of other guys, veterans, free agents, or you just go and get a trade or something like that. Shore up that defense a little bit, and then Washington will continue to be competitive and be a contender in the NFC. Now, that NFC East is going to be tough to win, playing against the Eagles, but they're building a team that's able to compete with them. So right now I like where the Commanders are at. So those are my thoughts about the Commanders and what they could potentially do this coming season. When we come back, we're going to dip into a little bit of college football for a segment. We've just got one College Corner segment before we finish off the show with our final segment later on about the Aaron Rodgers stuff that's going on. So stick with us real quick. We're going to take another quick break, and we will be right back to talk some college football.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. We're going to get right into our fourth segment here. We're going to talk a little bit of college football here. We're going to dip into the SEC, talk about Kentucky. The Wildcats last year, of course, not going the way they had planned or the way they had hoped, finishing with a 4-8 record. It was the worst win total since Mark Stoops, the head coach, first season in 2013. They struggled offensively, particularly against strong defenses, ultimately lost the Governor's Cup to Louisville as well. That was not a great game for them either. But the bright side for Kentucky, despite as bad of a year as they had last year, is if everything goes right for them this year, they could realistically maybe flip that record completely and go maybe 8-4, 8-5, something like that. And they could, of course, be in a bowl game at that point, which would, of course, be a step up considering what they did last year. 4-win season, not where you want to be. And Kentucky, for a little bit there, when they had Will Levis, they were actually putting together some pretty decent seasons overall. But they, of course, kind of reversed a little bit back towards what we have been typically accustomed to with Kentucky football. And that is a pretty rough year last year. But taking a look at their schedule this coming season before we get further into their team as a whole. This year, if you're just looking at it realistically, some of their non-conference opponents that you could probably see them getting wins over would be teams like Toledo, maybe Eastern Michigan, Tennessee Tech, and possibly Louisville, getting a little bit of revenge there. So that's 4 wins right there. If you take a look at the rest of their schedule, they do have to play in the SEC. They play against Florida, who should be improved too, so that's going to be a tough game. Tennessee as well. Tennessee was a college football playoff team last year. That's going to be a tough game to win. Ole Miss is another game that's going to be tough for them to win. So they've got a lot of tough games. Playing in the SEC, it's not easy, of course. So Kentucky's going to have to really push through to get a much better record than they did. I think they will have a much better record, maybe not a much better record, but they should have a better record at least. Maybe that's a 6-win season. Maybe they, sneak into a bowl game, with 6 wins. Who knows? But diving into their team a little bit, at quarterback, Zach Calzada looks like he is going to be the starter. He has a rocket for an arm, so that is one of the best attributes that he has. The ease that he basically can generate down the field with his velocity is pretty up there with another guy who had a really good arm with Kentucky, and that was Will Levis. Now, Will Levis may not have done much in the NFL to this point in his career, but when he was at Kentucky were competing, and he was a big reason why. He played very well, along with some other aspects of that team, that made them competitive for the most part when he was here. But the thing with Calzada is he's one of those kind of quarterbacks that can kind of just flick his wrist and then the ball travels 60 yards. He's just one of those kinds of players that has that kind of arm strength. So that's going to be an exciting thing to watch for Kentucky football. As far as we move further down the offense at running back, looks like it's going to be Jason Patterson that's going to end up as a starter. He's redshirt freshman tailback Jamarian Wilcox also was one of the few bright spots for last season's offense, and he routinely made plays when the ball was in his hands. He averaged a team-best 6.4 yards per carry, had 92 attempts over the course of last season. Out of the transfer portal, Kentucky also added former Nebraska running back Dante Dowdle, so that's another name to keep an eye on. A redshirt freshman from Florida, Jason Patterson, is the guy who is most likely going to be the starter. He has gotten most of the team reps in practice during spring ball, which just recently wrapped up, actually. Spring ball for Kentucky, that is. Then during the final practice of spring on April 12th at Kroger Field, so the home field of Kentucky, Patterson and Dowdle split time with the first offense. So back when they first opened it to media members on April 2nd, he was getting all of the first team reps. And then at a later date, now we're seeing a split backfield. So they could incorporate kind of a dual running back sort of system there, but it seems like Patterson is going to get the lion's share of the carries for the most part when the season goes along. But the team or the guys that they're going to be in front or that are going to be in front of them, the offensive line, they're going to be a lot heavier than in recent years. They added a lot of much needed heft on that offensive line. Some really big guys to go along there. They added some reinforcements via the transfer portal as well. That's just kind of an attempt for them to sort of fortify that unit because they struggled pretty mightily last year in just about every area. They were not very good against the pass, not very good against the run, with blocking or anything like that on the run game. They didn't generate a lot of holes. They had a lot of collapsing pockets for their quarterbacks, no matter who was at the position. Brock Vandegrift, he started 11 games. Gavin Wimsatt and Cutter Boley got more reps as the season became increasingly stressful when they started to really lose those games. They permitted almost 3 sacks per game on that offensive line. So that was definitely one of the worst in college football as far as that stat is concerned. So what they went ahead and did to sort of address that issue, that concern, is they went to the transfer portal and they went ahead and they got guys that were much bigger bodies on the offensive line. You have Josh Braun, who's 6'6", 342 pounds. Shiaz Pete, who is 6'8", 321 pounds. Wallace Unamba, who is 6'6", 335 pounds. Evan Wibberly, 6'5", 301 pounds. And then finally, Alex Wolschlager, he is 6'7", 310 pounds. So a lot of big bodies across that offensive line. So hopefully they are, of course, good with their techniques, of course, not just big bodied, but hopefully that will help protect the quarterback and also maybe open up some more lanes for the running backs to run through. Only time will tell in terms of that. The aerial attack should have a little bit more weaponry along the wide receiver position this go-round this season. Dane Key, last season's go-to target, is now at Nebraska, so he was basically a safety valve last year for Kentucky. And he was also, for all intents and purposes, the only option that they had in the passing game. So one player, essentially was the guy, and that was Dane Key. And he tallied more receptions on his own than his 2 closest teammates combined, and that was Berrien Brown. And then, of course, Demi Sumo Karngbaye, and I could be pronouncing that wrong as well because, I'm not great with names. But combined, he had more receptions than both of those guys combined. So he was by far their main target and their best target. And now that he is gone, he's at Nebraska, so there's going to have to be some sort of, adjustment there and some more production out of other players as the season goes along. But as explosive as Berrien Brown could be, particularly on special teams, he is a good special teamer. There were far too many occasions where he was a non-factor last year offensively. And Jamori Macklin, he is the leading returnee in the wideout room. he began to put things together late last year. So he was just, it was too little, too late to kind of salvage the whole season, because they were already so far gone in terms of record at that point when he came in. So they weren't really able to salvage much, but there was at least some optimism there with Macklin returning this year. So that is definitely a positive. Other aspects of the receiver room, Kendrick Law, an intra-conference transfer from Alabama, was a standout at the spring practices while lining up in the slot. So that is something to keep of note, something to keep an eye on their offense. Moving over to the defense briefly, third-year sophomore linebacker Grant Godfrey is the stud on that defense. He could help in multiple areas. 6'3", 225 pounds. Grant Godfrey, he's got that build of a modern SEC linebacker, fast enough, stout enough to help against the run, and he's got a ton of ability to assist in pass coverage as well. His speed and his ability to cover coming out of the backfield is definitely an asset that Kentucky will look to try and take advantage of. But after an injury-plagued career so far in Kentucky, where they're hoping that Godfrey can stay healthy, and he's one of the more highly regarded signees from the 2023 recruiting class. So he could be primed for a pretty fair share of playing time coming into this season. If he's able to stay healthy, that is, because that's the biggest concern, really. If he can stay healthy, then that's a big part of their defense that's going to be available, and they should be better overall defensively because of it. So Kentucky, I do think they are going to be better than they were last year. They had a 4-win season last year, so there's nowhere to go but up, essentially. Mark Stoops is a good head coach. He's typically had them competitive the entire time that he's been there, other than, of course, last year, and then, of course, his first year in 2013 when they had a very similar type of season. But he's a good enough head coach to where they can bounce back, and I could see them getting 6 or 7 wins this year. Maybe 6 is probably more realistic, given the SEC schedule and all that. But that's what I have for Kentucky right now. So that's it for that segment. So when we come back, though, we're going to dive into our final segment of the show. I left it as the final segment just in case there are some people that are no longer watching. You don't have to hear me complain about Aaron Rodgers anymore, because I'm sticking it to the last segment of the show, and we're going to talk about his appearance that he had on Pat McAfee earlier today. Talked a little bit about his future plans and said a lot without saying anything, So we're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about that. So stick with us, and we will be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to the final segment of our show. And mercifully, we are going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers again. So Aaron Rodgers, of course, appeared on the Pat McAfee show earlier today in his normal segment that he typically comes on every week with Pat McAfee. But today, this was the first time that he had made an appearance and actually said anything in over about 3 months or something, or really since this whole situation has kind of kicked off. So just some of the things that he said, just he's essentially was talking about his time at the Jets and the conversation that he had with Aaron Glenn, the current Jets head coach, and basically said that meeting did not really go well. Made a point to say that he flew out to the New York Jets facilities on his own dime. Made sure to say that, of course. And then he had a meeting with Aaron Glenn, and it didn't necessarily go well. He said that Aaron Glenn came in and sat down. They only had like a quick conversation, and then he told Aaron Rodgers that they're going in a different direction at quarterback. So Aaron Rodgers was a little upset about that because he felt like it could have been a phone call rather than having him fly over to New York, which, I mean, part of that I do kind of agree with. That probably could have just been something in a phone call, but, you know, it is what it is. He can get over that. But in terms of like what he was talking about with the whole state of the Steelers' possible acquisition and all of that, he is basically just saying that he has personal issues going on in his life right now and doesn't feel like he owes anybody an explanation or a timeline or anything like that, essentially. He just said a lot of things that people pretty much already knew, and he didn't really say really much of anything that's any different. But what I did kind of gather from just watching the interview was he did almost sound like a guy that is not really fully committed to playing football this year. And if that is the case, which it certainly seems as though that is the case based on what he said and some of the ways that he was saying things, if he's not going to be 100% committed to your team, why would you want him? You know, I've talked about this hundreds of times, it seems like, on this channel, and this is the whole reason why I never wanted the whole Aaron Rodgers thing, is because this is just gone on and gone on and gone on and just dragged on the entire offseason, and we still, as we sit 1 week away from the draft, we still don't have an answer. If I'm the Steelers, I'm moving on with the idea that he is not going to be a Steeler this year. That's what I'm doing if I'm the Steelers. Move forward as though he will not be on your squad next year, because they cannot afford to wait around for this guy. He still has not made up his mind. He basically came on to the Pat McAfee show to basically complain that other people are getting frustrated with him not making up his mind. And then he comes onto this show and doesn't even say anything. He still says that he's still thinking about it and he's still not sure and all that. It's like, you know, come on, man. It's like, you're 42 years old. You're not winning a Super Bowl with the options that you have. The Steelers are the only option right now for Aaron Rodgers in terms of if he wants to continue to play. And he ain't winning a Super Bowl in Pittsburgh. It's just not happening. So I don't know what it is that he's even looking for in a team, or what it is that he even wants in a team. But if I'm the Steelers, I'm moving on. I'm done with this if I'm them. Like, he's a 42-year-old quarterback. I mean, that is in itself enough of an issue for you to just say, no, we'll just ride with Mason Rudolph and draft a guy, which is what I think they should do. This whole Aaron Rodgers thing is just continued to drag on, and I don't think it's going to be solved even after the draft. I think if you're the Steelers, you have to move on. You've got to go into the season and the off season with the idea that it's going to be Mason Rudolph and whoever it is that you draft to fill out that room. So that's just going to have to be the way it is. I still don't believe the Steelers take a quarterback in the first round. I know that they're talking about potentially trying to move into the second round since they don't have a second round pick anymore, since they gave that up to get DK Metcalf. So maybe they go and try and do a trade to get into the second round and, you know, maybe get a guy in the second round, whether that's Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, whatever the case. I will say this about Jalen Milroe. He is a project quarterback, of course, but if he was able to reach his full potential that he could potentially reach, then he could be one of the best quarterbacks, and definitely would be the best quarterback in this entire draft class if he was to reach his potential. That is, that's a big if, of course. So, and the Steelers haven't necessarily been known for developing quarterbacks, so doesn't really give me a ton of confidence that if he comes here, they would be able to develop him in a way that he makes him effective, because I don't think they did a very good job with Kenny Pickett. Sure, Kenny Pickett was not a first-round pick. I mean, he was technically a first-round pick, but talent-wise, he's not a first-round graded quarterback. And they drafted him first round anyway, but I feel like they really kind of handcuffed his ability to really express himself as a quarterback. They had a really, really bad offensive coordinator, so it wasn't a great situation when Kenny Pickett was there. It still isn't a great situation. I mean, Arthur Smith is a better offensive coordinator, sure, I'll give him that, but that's not saying much. Matt Canada, he could not get a team over 400 yards his entire time he was there. Could only got the Steelers across 30 points once, and that was a game that they lost. So, he was a terrible offensive coordinator. So, yes, by comparison, Arthur Smith is a better offensive coordinator. But I still have my own questions and concerns about Arthur Smith and his offense, and I think bringing in Aaron Rodgers would kind of stunt a lot of what he's trying to build as an offense there in Pittsburgh. So I feel like it's better suited for Mason Rudolph as far as this offensive scheme. It's better suited for him. Let him be the guy that is the starter going into week 1. And then, whoever it is you draft, whether it's the first round, third round, second round, fifth round, whatever the case, you can have that guy as the backup and then, go and get somebody else to fill out the quarterback room. Or if you want to move Skylar Thompson up because he's on a futures contract, which everybody seems to keep thinking that he is, number 3 in the quarterback room. Skylar Thompson is probably not even going to be on the roster when the season kicks off. So I don't even look at that as him, being signed or as the Steelers having a quarterback that's signed. In my opinion, the only quarterback that is signed is Mason Rudolph right now. So I don't think they go into the season with Skylar Thompson as the third string guy. I think they go get somebody else, but I think they're definitely getting a quarterback at some point in this draft. Just where it happens to be, that's the question, really. Because this Aaron Rodgers news, I think, just kind of further supports the idea that he is possibly going to retire. I feel, based on what I heard today, that he is leaning more towards retirement than he is to coming back and playing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think it's going to happen ultimately. For a while there, I thought that it was going to happen, but as time has continued to drag on and there's still no movement, and then he finally makes an appearance and he still says that he doesn't know, says that he's been in contact with Mike Tomlin and everything, and the Steelers can move on if they need to and all that. This is a guy that doesn't even want to be playing, it doesn't sound like. He certainly doesn't seem like he wants to play for the Steelers, because if he really did, he'd already be in Pittsburgh right now. They'd already have the deal done, but they don't. So right now, I think it's just a situation of you got to move on. Aaron Rodgers is not going to be your guy, so you got to move on to the NFL draft and see what you can get in the NFL draft. But that's all I'm going to say about the whole situation, because I have talked ad nauseum about Aaron Rodgers on this show, and I don't want to spend too much more time talking about it. So that's going to do it for the show tonight. I hope you guys did enjoy it. We had a couple of different topics here this time, so a little bit of a change than our normal, season previews that we've been doing left and right. So I appreciate you guys all joining me as always, and thank you for tuning in. GSMC Football Podcast. We're presented by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. And we also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. Thank you guys once again. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you tomorrow night on our Friday show. All right, guys. Talk to you later.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.